So, from with only these few things, few ideas, few thoughts, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Alexander Vandenberg from Wind Europe. Alexander, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Panagiotis, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody, indeed, on this challenging day. I'm Alexander in full. I work for Wind Europe as a Research Innovation Manager, and I will be giving an overview of where we stand today on blade recycling in terms of the volumes and the technologies available as to build a better understanding of the scope of this challenge. For those that may not know what Wind Europe is, a very quick slide. We are the European Trade Association. We connect more than 400 members across the entire value chain of the wind energy sector. Basically, everybody who is involved in some form or fashion in the wind industry, we represent them at the European level. And of course, we have all the national energy associations as our members as well. Now, why are we talking about blade recycling? Well, the answer is quite simple. Our onshore fleet, so the onshore wind turbines, are getting older and older. And you can see that on the next slide. Today, we have around 208 gigawatts of installed onshore wind capacity in Europe. That's more than 100,000 turbines. 20% of those turbines are older than 20 years. Yeah, you can see them here on the right-hand side of the slide. Now, those 20,000 turbines, they represent just under 10% of the capacity, but they are a significant share of the entire onshore fleet. So there is quite a challenge to deal with these turbines as they are approaching their end of their lifetime. The challenge is that, of course, these turbines are not spread evenly across Europe. You can see on the next slide exactly where the issue is most pressing, where there's a lot of orange and a lot of red. So in this case, you can clearly see it's in Denmark and Germany that the issue is most pressing, but also that in Austria, Spain, and Portugal, there are quite some turbines that are older than 20 years. The slide also shows very clearly that over time, the issue of blade recycling and how to deal with end-of-life turbines will actually be a challenge for every country in Europe, everywhere where we have onshore wind turbines installed. If we look a little bit closer to detail to Greece, we can see the following. Yeah, there are around just under 3,000 turbines in Greece installed, with around 15% of those being older than 20 years. And at the moment, just 1% is older than 24 years old. And you can see them here spread across 4 different wind farms. If we take all of these turbines and we see they're reaching their end of life, what does it actually mean? We can count the number of blades, but obviously we want to know how many tons of material that would be. And that we will see on the next slide. So here we can see that for the next year or so, and this year as well, and the past year, we were at around 15,000 tons of decommissioned blade material. By 2025, this will be twice as much, so around 30,000 tons. By the end of the decade, we have doubled again, which would be around 60,000 tons of blade material. Obviously, each turbine, when it reaches its end of life, this happens on a case-by-case basis. Many turbines reach 20 years and are very good condition still. They can continue operating. Some will be decommissioned. We expect that as we progress over time, that most of the turbines, as they reach 30 years, will all be decommissioned and therefore will be put for recycling. So what do we do actually with these decommissioned turbines and these decommissioned blades? Well, for that, we can look at a hierarchy for how to treat waste. And it goes from prevention, which is the best solution, to disposal, which is the least preferred option. Now, prevention is quite simple. It's trying to prevent the waste from occurring. In the case of blades, this is trying to extend the lifetime of the blade as long as possible. As mentioned, if a turbine reaches 20 years or 25 years of time, sometimes it's still very good condition. With some minor repairs, it can continue to operate for another 5 to 10 years. That is prevention. Reuse would be when we would decommission a turbine and then install it again somewhere else and use it again for those same 5 to 10 years. Yeah, this is actually quite often happening in the real world, where there is a vibrant second-hand market for wind turbines. But ultimately, with all the technologies we have for prevention and reuse, all turbines will at one point be decommissioned and be put up for recycling. And therefore, we need to look into repurposing, recycling, recovering, and disposal. Let's take a look at the first one, repurposing. Repurposing is when you take the blade and you make only some minor modifications to the blade itself, and you use that infrastructure, let's say, for a different purpose. To give some examples, you can see them on the right here. So you have some repurposed blades as bike sheds, as climbing walls, as support for pedestrian bridges. Now, repurposing is great, and we need more of it. But they have a limited scope to scalability. Yeah, there are only so many bike sheds we need. There are only so many climbing walls we can provide. Yeah. So ultimately, we will need something more to deal with these volumes of blade waste material. And that's where recycling comes in. Recycling is where you take those decommissioned blades and you break them up again into their core materials, and then you use those core materials to create new products. We've had some technologies and some projects running already, but they have relatively stayed at a small scale. And you can see some of the examples there on the right. Some furniture created out of recycled blades, wine racks, padding for sound wall proofing, etc. What are the challenges to recycling? And I want to delve a little bit deeper into this and show you the next slide, which is quite complex, but I will guide you through it. This slide basically shows the 3 issues that we have with blade recycling technologies. The first is the cost efficiency. On this graph, you can see that the placing of the boxes is not where it should be. The best place is at the bottom right corner, a high TRL, high maturity, that means, and a low process cost. In reality, we see that most of the recycling technologies are in the top left corner, so they're not very mature and they're relatively expensive. The second issue is the source material. In this graph, that is the color of the box, the orange or the green. You can see that most of the technologies are focused on carbon fibers, on the recycling of carbon fibers. In reality, the blades are majorly made of glass fibers. So we need more technologies to focus on glass fiber. And the third issue is the performance of the technology. In this graph, it is shown by the color of the blue within each of the boxes, where a dark blue means a highly performant technology and a light blue means a not so performant technology. And performance is here measured in the quality of the recyclate, the material that you have at the end of the recycling process. And so what we see is that for glass fibers, yes, we do have high level, high maturity technologies that are relatively process and cost efficient, but they have a very low end value product, which means that even if the technologies are at a low cost, they might not be cost competitive with the original virgin material, which would be virgin glass fibers, which are relatively cheaply available in the market. Co-processing is maybe the most promising at this moment, but it's technically a energy recovery technology. So that brings us to the next step, energy recovery, which means where you are taking the blade material and you are recovering the energy that was used to create it. And you basically substitute another material with these blades, these recycled blades or these cut up blades, and therefore you recover the energy. Yeah, most known is cement co-processing. You can see a picture here where we use the blade material as part of the kiln process. You do lose the original materials, though, in this process. So it's not ideal and therefore lower on the ranking than recycling. And if all else fails, if we cannot repurpose, if we cannot recycle, and we cannot recover the wind turbine blades, then disposal is the only alternative left. In reality, this means landfilling. Now, landfilling does occur in Europe, but only in a very limited scale. As mentioned earlier, there's a vibrant second-hand market, so that reuse. There are some projects on repurposing, which also take up quite a lot of the blade material, and there's also some recycling and some recovering taking place. Landfilling wind turbine blades is safe. It's not a toxic hazard, but it is a waste of space and a waste of resources. And whilst at the moment most countries are allowing for landfilling recycled, decommissioned turbine blades, 4 countries prohibit them. And we, as the wind energy sector in Europe, we actually want a complete European-wide ban on landfilling wind turbine blades by 2025. We want this entire map to be red. So in that case, we are proposing we have written a position paper that proposes 4 actions to really achieve this goal, to stop landfilling, and therefore also to commit ourselves to repurposing, recycling, and recovering our decommissioned blades. Our 4 action points can be summed up as following. We need more R&D, both in the scaling up and improving of the recycling technologies, as mentioned earlier, getting them from the left top corner of that slide to the right bottom corner of the slide. We also need more R&D in innovation into the materials and the designs of our future blades, making them fully recyclable and circular by the design stage. And then the second we also need to build up the business case, which means incentivizing the use of the recycled materials, but also pooling the waste streams of composite materials, as mentioned in the introduction. There are many different sectors that use similar composite materials. If we can pool them together, we will help these startups and SMEs that are investing in recycling technologies to scale up and really bring down the costs of their technology significantly. We as Wind Europe are working together with the Composites Association and with the European boating industry to really drive this forward. If you want to know more about the topic of blade recycling or how to achieve full circularity, I also encourage you to visit our Wind Europe website. On the Intelligent platform, we have 2 great publications on this topic there. And of course, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them either now in the end or via email afterwards. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Obviously, there will be some questions. I will collect them and I will pass you at the end of the session to everybody, or I will send you the email afterwards.